Hello everyone, it's Kate Leeming here, and I'm very excited to bring you the very first update of my expedition, Breaking the Cycle Central Asia, which is a 10,000 kilometer cycle expedition through Central Asia and through the heart of Central Asia. And so it all started, I arrived in Kujan, which is the very historical city in Tajikistan that's located on the Sirdarya River. And I arrived there on World Water Day. And that's really important because this journey is all about water, and really water connects every aspect of life. So as I cycle down and follow the rivers, I'll be looking to explore all the different aspects of life and how people live and how the water is managed. So Kujan itself is a very wonderful city. It was founded over 2,500 years ago by Alexander the Great, and it's got lots of character as well. So he was a very famous leader from Macedonia. The 24th of March came around and I was very excited to get going, setting off from the bank of the river. And unfortunately, rain was very much forecast for this day. So I set off on these minor roads. Tourists don't go through this part. I was sort of going through these little tracks between the mountains and the river and having a look at the sort of little farms and things. And it started raining, and so these little tracks, I got very muddy and it was very cold, actually, not what I was expecting. And then basically followed the border between Uzbekistan and Tajikistan all the way up to the border crossing, and then across into Uzbekistan, still in the rain, still very cold, and I had to go very hard to get to the destination on that first night in Buka, having done 122 kilometers on my first day. I arrived in Tashkent, the capital of Uzbekistan, and had a little bit of time to recover and have some traditional pilaf rice and see a few of the sites before setting off again and crossing a little part of Uzbekistan and then diverting down to a place, because I wanted to tell a story about this reservoir called Sardoba that 5 years ago burst its banks and it flooded an area, and it was all about sort of the mismanagement of the water and how it was, why the dam was built there and all that kind of thing. So went there and really looking to get an idea of what it was like to live there, and very lucky to stay in this little village called Uchtam with Karamat, Yusuf and their families. And I mean, this house that where you can see that picture of myself, the little boy, was very excited about my bike. I mean, that was under 5 meters of water, and they were homeless for 2 years before the government was able to rebuild their house for them, and they lost all of their animals and that kind of thing. So fantastic to have some pilaf with Karamat, and then to go close to the dam. We weren't allowed to go there. It's still very politically sensitive to go there, and we were stopped. But that was one of the gates that would have been let open. The banks there are actually 127 meters tall. That's how big the dam is. Then I travelled across another 100 kilometers across the landscape, which is lots of small farms and little villages and things, to Lake Adakul, which is another lake that was created when there was floods, big floods of the Sirdarya River, and they diverted the water to fill up this salt pan depression on the edge of the desert. And that lake's become so big now. It's a salty lake. It's about 4,000 kilometers squared and has lots of fish. And we stayed in a place that was a fisherman's quarters, and then you can see the boats there and so on. So that was very interesting. And then back to the Sirdarya again, and then across the border and into Kazakstan. And now there's another part of this area called Shadara Reservoir, and I was sort of cycled right around the edge of that and looking at all the market gardening, and it's an incredible mecca for bird life, and there's beautiful flocks of pelicans and all sorts of things there. And then continuing on back on the road again, we had samosas for breakfast one morning, and then this was a chance also to sort of find out about some sort of more about the Silk Route and different characters. And there's this fellow known as the Big Man. His name was hang on, just get that name, Uzanata, and his nickname was the Big Man. He was apparently very tall, and this was his mausoleum we were allowed to go and have a look at. His grave is underneath that sort of mound there, and the mound was 5 meters long. He was definitely not that tall. Moving on, then went to this very famous city called Otra, and Otra was the biggest city on the northern branch of the Silk Route for many centuries, and it had about a population of about 20,000, where people from China met people from the West and the Middle East, and they would trade religions and science and everything. So it was a real melting pot of different cultures, and it's all there because of the river. The only reason these places could be there is because they had a reliable source of water as we're coming into the desert. And so that was very, very interesting. And then continuing on, where I am now, where I'm talking from, is Turkestan. So I arrived in Turkestan, and I'm having a rest day, which is very much needed. I've done nearly 900 kilometers, and I need time for my body to catch up. So in one of the most famous, or the most famous building in Turkestan is the mausoleum of Khoja Ahmed Yesawi, and that's actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And you can see that blue, that incredible turquoise blue that they use at that time, and that was representative of the glacial water that flows down and brings life. So the water from the glaciers up in the mountains flows down, and that's what everyone's got to thank. So that's kind of quite incredible. And this mausoleum was commissioned by Timur, who was one of the most powerful leaders in Central Asia and in the medieval times. And Timur, he died, and the building was still being built when Timur died, and so they ceased work. So the building was never quite complete. And you can actually see in that final picture there, you can see there's scaffolding, that's medieval scaffolding, that's still just left there because they hadn't quite finished it. But the birds love it, and so I think it looks wonderful, gives it great character. So that's about it. I mean, one of the real highlights I would have thought was also camping beside the river. Had a few beautiful camps, and you can see that beautiful shot I've got in the sort of last light of the afternoon. And that the river there is like 17 meters deep, and it was not even full yet because when it floods, when all the glacial water sort of melts in from May onwards, it's even more water coming down. So it's an incredible resource, and it's a beautiful place. And that place there, in fact, the bushland there was home to the Turan tiger, which became extinct about in the early 1900s. So that's about the wrap. Been great so far, and there's a lot to look forward to as I head towards the Aral Sea. Bye for now.